Hey everybody, this is GGB. We're gonna go into college basketball update of the day, Thursday edition. We had an upset yesterday, guys. Fortunately for me, it was not my upset. I almost had my upset. I almost did. I took a gamble yesterday. It almost paid off, but no. The refs decided to give Arkansas the game at the end of the game. Go back and watch the end of that game because it's some royal BS. It just the refs so handed Arkansas that game. It was not even funny. It was ridiculously angering. Not even an LSU fan. I just wanted LSU to win so I could get the points. But the hook and hold, both of them hook and held. I don't understand how it's just called on the LSU player. I legitimately don't get that. And at the end of the game, the guy obviously jumped and landed before the LSU guy even touched him. I have no idea what is going through the ref's head when they called that foul, but they decided, just give the Razorbacks the game. Why not? Normally, I'm complaining about how they give LSU football games. Nah, this was an Arkansas loss. This should have been an LSU win. The refs decided to give it to Arkansas, and I am royally angry at the refs. It's just a horrible refing job. Just one of the worst I've seen in college basketball since I've started watching this year. I mean, it was bad, guys. That ending to that game decided who won it, and refs decided we wanted Arkansas to win the basketball game, so they gave it to them. They didn't deserve the win. They did not. But you know who did deserve the win? Texas A&M. Texas A&M went there 10-point underdogs, biggest underdogs of the day of the ranked teams. Texas A&M wiped the floor with Alabama. It wasn't close. Texas A&M won, I think, by 16 points. That's not a close matchup, guys. Definition of just absolutely domination on every aspect of the court. On the bright side for Texas A&M, they went up a spot, and they can still move up spots. They moved to 8-9 on the year. With a win, you can move to 9-9. Some teams lose up here. You're looking at passing possibly LSU, South Carolina, Florida. Like, legitimately, if you're Texas A&M, you could be the 6th seed. What's crazy about this, Texas A&M, if they finish the season strong and other teams flounder, you could pass them, guys. The Aggies have the chance to move up high in these rankings. They already moved up one spot tonight and moved into a tie, technically speaking, with LSU. Both sit at 8-9 in conference, and Mississippi State, but Texas A&M passes Mississippi State with a better 19-11 record. Fortunately for Texas A&M, they lost one more game out of conference than LSU did. She got a win over Penn State and Oregon, Penn State and Wake Forest, but just really kind of interesting to me how good Texas A&M's a better team than their record in conference record indicates, and this could be like if I had to pick a team that I think could make a surprising run in the SEC tournament. I think Texas A&M and arguably Mississippi State could also make a surprising run in the tournament. They're both really solid basketball teams that just had some bad luck. Obviously, Mississippi State probably deserved to win that Auburn game. Just unfortunately, Auburn figured out a way to get it to overtime, and Auburn's just a deeper basketball team. But Mississippi State definitely had a chance there, and they arguably should have won that basketball game. Texas A&M's kind of an overlooked team. It really is. On the other side of things, Alabama lost, forcing a tie with Florida. Alabama wins the tiebreaker simply because they beat the Gators before. But suddenly, if you're the Gators, you're in a position where if you win on Saturday, and you get some help from the LSU Tigers, you could be the 5 seed. So that's interesting. You forced at least a scenario for Florida. Florida can be in an excellent position getting to the 5 seed. Remember that 5 seed in the SEC gets a double bye. So in the Big Ten, you get to the 4 seed, you get a double bye. The big race in the SEC is for the 5 seed between Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, and even LSU, Texas A&M, and Mississippi State are all in the race, sort of. It's going to be really interesting down the stretch. But we have 6 ranked matchups today. And let's get into the first one. At 6 o'clock, we have Temple, which is at 16-10, traveling to number 14, Houston, which is at 25-4. Houston favored by 16 on ESPN2. And Houston sits at 14-2 in conference, first place in conference on a 5-game winning streak. Have not lost since that disappointing loss at Memphis at home. Temple sits at 9-6 in conference, 16-10 overall. Now, again, if I'm an SMU and Memphis fan, you're not winning the number 1 overall seed. It's just not going to happen. So I'd be rooting for Houston. Houston would be my favorite team in the American outside of my own. Because if Houston, it doesn't look phenomenally great, that's what you need Houston to look like if you're SMU and Memphis, then you're in trouble if you're SMU and Memphis, because that's your ticket to March Madness, is that you beat Houston. That's your big selling point if you're the Mustangs and if you're the Tigers. So I'd want Houston to keep winning. And if you're the UCF Knights, you want Temple to lose. Temple sits at 9-6 in conference. With a win, they move to 10-6 in conference. They're 1 game back from the Memphis Tigers. Obviously, you don't want that if you're Memphis. But on the other side of things, if Temple loses, they fall to 9-7 in conference, 16-11 overall. That would give UCF the tiebreaker, and UCF would move into 4th place. Those are my 4 favorite teams in the American, by the way. So that's really kind of cool if that could happen, and it's likely to happen. Houston 16-point favorites on ESPN2 at home. So, I mean, that's what's going to happen in the American. Moving on to the Big Ten, we got 3 matchups there today. 6 o'clock, we have Penn State, which is at 12-14. Traveling to number 20, Illinois, which is at 20-8. Illinois favorite 12.5 points on FS1. At 6 o'clock, we have Michigan State, which is at 19-10. Traveling to number 23, Ohio State, which is at 18-9. Ohio State favored by 6 on ESPN. And at 8 o'clock, we have number 24, Iowa, which is at 21-8. Traveling Michigan, which is at 16-12. Michigan favored by 1.5 points on FS1. So, obviously a huge game for Illinois. If Illinois wants to have if you win this game for Illinois, no, you don't lock it up, but best case scenario for Illinois, right? Remember, if they get into a tie with Wisconsin, Wisconsin has the tiebreaker over them. So best case scenario for Illinois, they are the 2 seed, right? But if you win out and Wisconsin loses their game against Nebraska, you will have a share of the regular season Big Ten title, which is pretty cool if you're Illinois. Remember, if Illinois loses here, you could probably take that last game off. It wouldn't make a huge difference outside of maybe your seeding. But I'd be a lot more interested in maybe going on a run and win the Big Ten tournament, saving some of your players there. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but you could conceivably bench your starters, at least Johnny Davis, make sure he doesn't get hurt. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but likelihood is that Illinois wins this basketball game. If Illinois was to lose this basketball game, they would fall to 13-6. Purdue has the tiebreaker over Illinois, so I would move Purdue back into the number 2 seed. That's what you're rooting for if you're the Boilermakers. Now, that's the worst case scenario for Illinois. Moving on to Iowa. Iowa obviously plays Michigan today. Iowa with a win can move to 12-7 and would no longer have to have a tiebreaker over Ohio State. They'd be half a game ahead of the Buckeyes. Now, the Buckeyes also play today, so that's the thing. If Iowa and Ohio State both win, then it goes down to the tiebreaker again. Iowa has the tiebreaker over Ohio State. If Iowa was to lose, Ohio State was to win. Obviously, Ohio State reclaims their number 4 spot, and Iowa would fall to 11-8 and actually into a tie overall with Rutgers and Michigan. Michigan, who would win the basketball game if they beat Iowa, obviously, move to 11-8 in conference. You could have a conceivable situation where if Iowa and Ohio State both lose this basketball game, they both fall to 11-8. Michigan State and Michigan would both win their basketball game. Suddenly you have a 5-way tie for 4th place in conference, all of them sitting at 11-8, which would be a pretty crazy scenario. Iowa would sit at 21-9. Ohio State would fall to 18-10. Rutgers would stay at 17-12. Michigan State would move to 20-10. And Michigan would move to 17-12. So Iowa would have the tiebreaker over that. But Michigan State would move into 5th place in conference. Ohio State would be in 6th place. And Rutgers and Michigan would have the same overall record at 17-12, which Michigan beat Rutgers the last time they've met, but Rutgers beat Michigan the time before that. So that'd be kind of interesting to see how the tiebreakers would work in that scenario, because, again, the top 3 tiebreakers would not matter because they would move past them, so it would go to record against the best Big Ten teams. I know Rutgers has beaten Wisconsin. I don't know if Michigan has, and I think Rutgers would actually have the tiebreaker there. So in that case scenario, you see Iowa's the 4 seed, Michigan State is the 5 seed, Ohio State is the 6 seed, Rutgers is the 7 seed, and Michigan as the 8 seed. It would be a pretty crazy scenario if that were to work out. Now, Michigan loses, Michigan State loses, Michigan wins, Michigan obviously passes Michigan State. So that's what's going on in that aspect of this all. And finally, Penn State's playing. They sit at 7-11, only half a game up on Maryland. If Penn State loses this basketball game, they would fall to 7-12, which would be bad because Penn State would lose on both counts of the tiebreaker, with the Terrapins, with the head-to-head and overall record both falling Maryland's way. That's not what you want if you're a Nittany Lions fan, but it's kind of what you expect. If you're a Nittany Lions fan, you're just hoping Maryland loses their Saturday game. I forgot who Maryland plays. They play Michigan State on Sunday. If you're a Penn State fan, you're just rooting for Michigan State to win that basketball game and save you, and maybe you can just beat Rutgers, and then you can be 10 seed. That's what you're hoping for if you're a Penn State basketball fan. If Penn State was to win this game, they could move to 8-11, and you could possibly force a tiebreaker with Indiana. Now, the overall wouldn't fall Penn State's way, but the final standings are determined by records against the top teams. And if Illinois is the number 2 overall team, Indiana did not beat Wisconsin, I'm pretty positive. And Indiana, I checked, did not beat Illinois. So if Illinois is the number 2 overall team and Penn State beats them today, then Penn State will at least have a chance. They'll have a chance to pass Indiana and be the 9 seed instead of the 7 seed. It's not a huge difference. It's the difference between playing Michigan State and Michigan. But, I want to be as high as possible. Plus, the 8-9 seed plays. Actually, they play the 1 seed, so it's not ideal. But, you got to beat the best if you want to be the best. So, Nittany Lions, you want to win this basketball game just to keep, if you're just rooting to keep Maryland off your backs. Then we got the Big 12 at 7 o'clock. We have TCU, which is at 19-9, traveling to number 6 Kansas, which is 23-6. Kansas favored by 10.5 points on ESPN Plus. Jayhawks trying to revenge that game with a win here. They can tie Baylor. Now Baylor has the better overall record. It would put you at least in a situation where Baylor would need to win against Iowa State to have a chance there. So it's kind of interesting looking. Baylor-Kansas race is going to be extremely fascinating down the stretch to see who has a chance at winning the Big 12, at least getting the number 1 seed in the Big 12, which is so important to winning a Big 12 championship. But TCU, with a loss, would put themselves in a not great spot. They would be 1 game up on Iowa State and Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma State doesn't really matter, again, because they cannot participate in the Big 12 tournament. With TCU, all you're trying to do is keep the 5 seed. You cannot pass Texas. It's physically impossible. Texas is locked into the 4 seed. TCU's goal is just to get the 5 seed. Don't want Iowa State to pass you, which could give Iowa State an opportunity if you lose this game in TCU. Kansas with a loss would fall to 12-5, and it would go to a tiebreaker, and it would have the exact same conference and exact same overall record with Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I don't believe, beat Kansas, if I remember correctly. Kansas beat them on January 24th, and Texas Tech beat them actually on January 8th. So, it would be interesting to see how the tiebreaker would work in that scenario, because, again, the factors that normally determine it would be tied if you're between the Red Raiders and Jayhawks. If you're a Jags fan, you lose the tiebreaker against Baylor, but, you win some, you lose some. You just want to make sure you have a chance at the number 1 seed. And if you lose this basketball game, you don't have a chance. Actually, you do have a chance, technically speaking, because then Baylor can lose against Iowa State. And if you just win against your last team, which is Texas, you could end up taking the number 1 overall seed. But Kansas would love to force Baylor to win against Iowa State and possibly win the tiebreaker that way. Finally, at 8 o'clock, we have Stanford, which is at 15-13. Traveling number 2, Arizona, which is at 26-3. Arizona favored by a whopping 18.5 points on ESPN2. Arizona obviously basically locked into the 1 seed. I know they have a clinched the share of the Pac-12. Now, I don't know if USC could possibly... I don't think they can. I think Arizona they have 2 games left. Worst case scenarios are 16-4. Best case scenario for USC is they're 15-5. It's just Arizona will be the number 1 seed in the Pac-12. Now, the only question is, will they be the number 1? Will they be a 1 seed in the March Madness tournament? That's what they're playing to determine down the rest of the stretch. Now, Stanford, with a win, can move to 9-10 in conference now, only half a game behind the Cougars and the Huskies. Now, the Huskies sit at 9-9 in conference and play Oregon tomorrow, or actually today. And Washington State sits at 9-9 in conference and plays Oregon State today at 10 o'clock. So conceivably speaking, Stanford could win this basketball game, move to 16-13, despite being on a 3-game losing streak and playing the best team in the Pac-12. Stanford could conceivably win this game and pass Washington and Washington State on tiebreakers and move up to 6th place in the Pac-12. That's at least theoretically speaking, though. Stanford with a loss would drop below Arizona State as long as Arizona State does not drop their matchup against Cal today. It's possible. But if Arizona State wins their basketball game and Stanford loses this basketball game, Arizona could move to 9-10 in conference. And if Washington and Washington State would both lost their games, now Arizona State would not have the tiebreakers over the Cougars or the Huskies, but you could be getting closer down the stretch for the Sun Devils, and conceivably speaking, for the Sun Devils, you could be shooting for a 6th seed, which would be pretty impressive considering how the Sun Devils started out the year. But Stanford sits at 8-10 overall in conference. A win would do good things for them. A loss would do bad things for them. I think it's pretty obvious who I'm going to pick here tonight. Actually, I don't think it's obvious. I mean, I understand the argument for Michigan, but I think Iowa's playing at such an elite level right now. I think it's hard to pick the Wolverines. I'm going to go with the Spartans. I understand the Spartans lost badly to Michigan Wolverines. Ohio State's been reeling lately, and I mean reeling. Like, they lost to Maryland and Nebraska in back-to-back games. That's the 11-14 seed, by the way, guys. And I'm not discounting Maryland. Maryland's a really good basketball team, and Nebraska's starting to heat up too. This is the Big Ten. If you can't beat the bottom teams, then I don't know if you're an elite basketball team, and I think the Spartans have a chance to pull off the upset here. Everybody, this is GV saying adios, amigos, and that hosts the Spartans this time, refs.